Support for Consider This is provided by the University of Nebraska at Omaha College of Communication, Fine Arts, and Media.
From the campus of the University of Nebraska at Omaha, Consider This, a program of issues and information behind today's news.
Which item in this picture do you think negatively affects people's health more than anything else? Alcohol? Cigarettes? The donut? Hamburger? Sure, they're all pretty bad for you, but most people know that and at least try to limit their intake somewhat to these items, even a little bit. But it's the things we don't think about that can really cause damage. Things we use every day so regularly we don't even think about how its constant use could actually be killing us. The real culprit is the chair.
Hi everyone, I'm Kathy Wyatt. Welcome to this week's edition of Consider This. Our topic, sedentary lifestyle. Here to talk more about it is Paul Estabrooks. Dr. Estabrooks is the Harold M. Moore Distinguished Chair and Professor at UNMC's Department of Public Health in the Department of Health Promotion. Thank you so much
it's a
for
mouthful.
being here. Welcome. I know it is.
Yeah.
Let's begin by defining a healthy lifestyle.
Sure. I mean, there's a lot of different ways that you can talk about a healthy lifestyle, and I think most people understand what it is. And but it really spans everything from making sure you're putting on your seatbelt when you're getting your car, to the foods that you eat, to the activities that you do, and just trying to make sure that the things that you're doing are the different types of behaviors that we know that are going to be protective of chronic conditions like diabetes, cancer, and heart disease.
Okay, and up until recently, more of us fell into that category. What happened?
Well, I think, it's really been, I do a lot of obesity research, and so it's really been in the last 3 to 4 decades where we've seen a steep incline in obesity. And so a lot of that can be attributed to things like we sit a lot more than what we used to do, a lot of automation relative to the workplace. People aren't out and active as often. We have a lot more technological supports that can entertain us as well as help us do our work, and so it ends up being that we're not doing as much activity, and then at the same time we have a lot of things going on in terms of the food environment and the composition of foods and the portion sizes of foods, and changes in how the beverages that we drink, so moving more to soda and sugary drinks, and people using less water. So it's kind of a combination of all of those things together that starts to move us away from kind of a healthier lifestyle towards one that's more sedentary, which means we sit more, and one that we're not necessarily eating the types of foods and drinks that we need to, and then we're just really not getting a whole lot of exercise or physical activity.
Right, and with a decrease in that comes an increase with something you mentioned, which is chronic conditions, right? How do you define a chronic condition?
Well, it's basically any type of illness that you get that you're going to have to deal with for potentially the rest of your life. And so we talk about things like diabetes. Once you have diabetes, you don't really come back from having diabetes. You have diabetes and you can manage it and you can have a good, healthy lifestyle, but it's always going to be something that you're going to need to be watching. And so a chronic condition really is something that you'll deal with throughout your life once from the time that you have it forward. And even things like a lot of forms of cancer now are considered chronic conditions because we have such good treatments and therapies that folks have the cancer, they manage to make their way through that treatment, but there may still be kind of remnants of that continue forward that they need to make sure they have secondary prevention. So for those folks, it's really important to be more active, eat a healthy diet, and sit a little bit less.
Yeah, and you've mentioned, I know 2 of them. You may have mentioned the third. We want to put the top 3 up on the screen for our viewers to see. And if there's anything that you can think of important for us to know other than they are the top 3, go ahead and add those then.
Sure. So those are, I think we got them all, the heart disease, cancer, and diabetes. And, I think foundational on all of that stuff is really the behaviors that we do. Those are the direct predictors or the direct causes of having chronic conditions. And so, of course, there's some genetic predisposition for folks, but really the primary driver is the degree to which people are, as I said earlier, are you eating fruits and vegetables? Are you getting 5 to 9 servings of those every day? Are you making sure that you're limiting the sugary beverages that you drink? Are you making sure that when you're at work, you're not sitting down for extended periods of time, and even at home? And then, are you getting somewhere between 30 to 60 minutes of moderate to vigorous physical activity every day?
I think one of the questions that people want to know, even though we could all do a better job of holding these at bay, is there a magic age, Paul, where we can expect these chronic conditions to kind of creep in? Is there an average age for them, or really does it span across the board?
Well, I think the thing with us, the changes that we've seen over the last 4 decades in terms of lifestyle behavior and obesity and those types of things is that, we used to think of type 2 diabetes. I can remember when I started my career in the late 90s, we were calling that mature onset diabetes. And so, you're looking at that typically hitting in with folks somewhere, 40 to 50 years old. You're kind of start to see some of these issues. But, now with kind of the current public health issue with obesity and with low levels of physical activity and unhealthy eating, we're seeing some of those things start to appear in teenagers. And so it's really, it's really kind of an urgent area to focus on.
And is it true that once you are diagnosed with one, that the likelihood is greater to be diagnosed with more than one? Because it seems that the people you meet, if they're talking about one, they're usually talking about a combination. Is that pretty common?
Well, I think that the issue is that the causes are common, right? Yeah. And so if you're not being active and you're not eating well and you sit down a whole lot of your day, well, then that predisposes you for all 3 of those things that we just looked at. And we know that, one of the biggest predictors of cardiovascular disease or heart disease is diabetes. And so there's a direct pathway and link between those 2 things. So I think it's the common cause. And so it's not surprising when people end up with, I have diabetes, and then, you see cases of colon cancer or those other things that might start to kind of stack up together and be what we'd call multiple comorbidities.
So I want to ask you something. People live their lives day in, day out. Is a chronic condition something that you go to the doctor and the doctor tells you, gosh, guess what, this is what you're dealing with, and it's this big surprise? Or do most people sense that they're kind of on the brink of that diagnosis? So does it sneak up on us, or is it really something that we're just kind of in denial about and we push off to the side, and maybe we're not going to the doctor as much as we should either? But how does that usually shake out with someone?
I think it really does sneak up on some people where, you don't realize that you have diabetes. You might have some of the symptomology in terms of, just things related to kind of, I'm peeing more, or, I'm just not necessarily even feeling off. And you could go to the doctor and it's your scheduled time based on guidelines that you should get an A1C test, and you get that test and lo and behold, you have diabetes. And in particular, people that have just kind of entered into that diabetic range with their hemoglobin A1C, so they might not feel anything at all. And it's the same with a lot of the predecessors or antecedents to heart disease, like hypertension. A lot of times people have hypertension and they don't know they have hypertension until they go to the doctor and they have their blood pressure tested. And so it really can sneak up on you. Now, I'd say, if you're somebody that's not doing 30 minutes of moderate intensity physical activity, if you sit at work for 8 hours a day and then you sit a lot at home, and then you're not eating many fruits and vegetables, you're not getting many grains in, you're eating a lot of kind of high fat, high sugar types of foods, well, I would think that most people nowadays know that you're kind of setting yourself up for some unwanted health outcomes later on.
Is there anything in particular, so we probably have viewers watching now thinking, uh-oh,
yeah.
What he's describing sounds like me, and we're so quick to jump to Google or WebMD or whatever it is. Is there any particular symptom that people may be experiencing that they shouldn't go overboard on, but take a little bit more seriously, that may be leading up to some of the things that you're talking about, a way we might be feeling or thinking or whatever the case may be?
Yeah, well, I think that when you're going up a set of stairs and you're feeling winded, if you're feeling winded going up a set of stairs, or if you're trying to hustle to get home and you're walking a block and you feel by the end of the block that you're breathing pretty heavily and that it's pretty exerting, then that's probably telling us that you haven't been conditioning yourself very well. And by conditioning, I don't necessarily mean a highly rigorous exercise regimen, but just that you've just not been moving that much. And so I think that when we'd talked before, you'd mentioned the idea of sitting disease, and we talk about as hypokinetic diseases, and when I use that type of term, I really mean heart disease and diabetes and hypertension and these things that really it's just that you haven't been moving a whole lot, and then from that standpoint you start to decondition your heart, and so then when you do try and even walk quickly, you start to, oh wow, that seemed like it was a little bit harder than I remember it. And the problem is, for most people, that happens gradually, and so it's not like a quick thing that, like, oh, yesterday when I walked up these stairs I felt great, and today I walk up them and I'm short of breath.
I want to speak to the mental piece of this for a minute, because oftentimes, I would imagine many people don't go to the doctor as often as they should anyway.
Right.
But you suspect that something may be wrong, and there are some folks who are likely to shut down because they think, if I go in now, not only are they going to find something here, but then they're going to find all sorts of other things. And there is a real fear for some people, because once you're diagnosed, obviously, then you need to learn to manage. And for someone whose lifestyle has been such, to get to that point, knowing full well if you go in that you're likely going to have to make a pretty significant change, that takes a lot of mental out of you. So talk about that a little bit.
Well, you're exactly right, and I think nobody wants to learn anything that's not great about themselves, and it's when you get this type of information, and you just described it really well. People just feel like, gosh, if I can just avoid this, maybe it won't be there, or maybe I'm just making things up. But what we know is that when people do their typical scheduled visits with their physician, whether it's getting your colorectal cancer screening at 50 or any of those types of things, when you go in and do that, even if they find something there, your health is going to be in so much better a place because they found it now than if they found it 3 years from now and you had progression into stages of that condition that take much more intensive medical focus. And so, relative to, hey, okay, we went in, we found something, and we're going to snip that out. Okay, great. Versus, hey, we found something, and now it's far enough along that we need to try these fairly extreme and important medical procedures. But that stuff, even it starts to cascade too. So you could have somebody that ends up having to have chemotherapy for cancer, and what we know about chemotherapy is that it has a debilitating impact on your cardiovascular system. So people that do that then really have to work hard on physical activity during treatment and after treatment, because the medicine itself has an impact, a negative impact on your cardiovascular system. So getting things earlier is always better, even if you have to learn and move forward. And then I think the other thing is to let people know that, for most of these things, we have good therapies now, and we have good pathways for people to live healthy and happy lives, even while they're managing a chronic condition.
Yeah, and I wanted to bring up the whole fact that as your health is deteriorating, chances are pretty good that your relationships are also deteriorating, because you have people around you who are saying you really should get that checked out, and you start to shut down, and then you start to shut out those people who care most about you. And then there's that whole caregiver dynamic. So speak to not only is this impacting one person, self, right? The people around you, and likely those who care most about you. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, well, I think it does have that kind of cascading impact on your social network, right? So, you might not be able to do the things that you've done before. You might not be able to take your kids to do, activities, go hiking or go playing, or, whatever types of things that you might do. And the other downside to that is that, yeah, you might get to a place where there's kind of this caregiving relationship where one of the partners is having to take care of the other partner, and that's not typically what we all think about. We all think about till death do us part, but we kind of think it's all going to be healthy and happy, and then we're going to drop dead, and that's going to be it. But unfortunately, there is some of that caregiving component to it, and the thing that's challenging sometimes in there is, the way that the caregiver supports is very important, in that sometimes people that have the condition will feel like I'm getting judged, or they're trying to tell me what I need to do, and I know what I need to do, but it's less about support and it's more about kind of criticism or being critical. And so it's kind of this crazy circular thing where you want to make sure that you have the support of those people around you, because a social network is so important for you even doing all of these preventive health behaviors that we've been talking about. And if you set the foundation there where you're being supportive throughout those, we all know, you can be highly physically active and not sit that much and never smoke and eat really well, and there's still that genetic component that you might end up with something that you're going to need to manage. And if kind of before you get to that point, you've spent a lot of good time working on your social relationships and in a supportive, kind of healthy way, then that helps when you get to the point where you're going to need those folks if you do run into some of these issues.
Yeah, absolutely. The other thing that I wanted to address here is the whole financial component, not just the cost to the individual, but healthcare in general is becoming so expensive, and there are things that are driving that. So what do you think is important for our viewers to know when it comes to that financial piece?
Well, I think that here in the United States, we're really focused on the individual, and we kind of pull our bootstraps up and we do our things and we have our choices, and that's all true and it's important. But what ends up happening is if you're someone that's not taking care of your health, the downstream economic impact to society is really big. And so, if you think about all of the things that are related to physical inactivity, so kind of hypokinetic diseases, as we've talked about before. If you look at direct cause of physical inactivity and its cost globally in healthcare systems, it's about $53 billion a year. And so, you think about that number and just all the things we could do with $53 billion. And you think, and I think we talked a little bit about smoking or sitting being the new smoking. And, and I think from the standpoint of, with smoking early on, people didn't really think that it was a health risk, right? And so they just didn't really think about it that way. And I think with sitting, there's a real similarity there. People don't really think, they think, oh, if I get up and do my physical activity and exercise, it doesn't really matter how much I sit because I'm doing all the work for my cardiovascular system. But we know that with sitting, there is independent downstream outcomes even over and above the exercise. But with tobacco, when I say 53 billion for hypokinetic disease or physical inactivity, with tobacco, it's almost 500 billion annually. And so when we talk about it from a global perspective, so these things, it's not just about individual choices, and I'd say even the participation in some of these things is not always about individual choices either, that we really need to be focusing on, what is it within our public health system, what is it within our community systems, as well as within our healthcare systems, so that we can kind of let the healthcare systems focus on the things when somebody does have these things and take care of them, but we make sure that we have nice preventive systems in place that help people to be more active. Maybe they're at a workplace that provides standing meeting rooms, so that folks have the standing tables rather than having chairs. So that it's not about me or you choosing that I'm going to stand up more, but in fact my office is built in a way that I'm naturally going to stand more because that's how the environment is.
And that's a great point to bring up, and we're going to get to that more in just a second. I want to back up just one step though.
Okay.
I'm thinking about both sides of the fence here. I'm thinking about people who have been inactive a good chunk of their life.
Yep.
Sitting can become very comfortable, right? Yep. Very commonplace. But I'm also thinking about those people who at one point in their lives were very active. And then slowly but surely, technology, work schedules, whatever the case may be, kind of fell away from that, right? There are challenges on both sides of that. Some would think that it's not as challenging for the person who was active because, well, they've been there. But it can be equally as challenging. So before we get into the environments, if you could briefly speak to that important first step in getting out of that chair, regardless of where you've been.
That's a really good way to put it. And I like that you gave me a transition with step. You know, like really it's about walking. And especially if you're somebody that has not been doing any exercise or any moderate intensity physical activity. And when I say moderate intensity, I'm meaning something that's like a brisk walk or faster. So if you're walking late to somewhere, that's typically a brisk walk. Your heart rate gets going a little more, you start breathing a little heavier, maybe you start to sweat a little bit. But that's the type of physical activity that we know is protective of heart disease, diabetes, and cancers. And so if you're somebody that hasn't been doing much of that, walking is a really great place to start. And it doesn't have to be a lot, and it doesn't have to be long. And you know, when we have people in our studies and we're trying to increase physical activity, we have a very simple graduated program that, you know, you start with 5 minutes, 3 days a week, and we have them, you know, hey, put it on your calendar, schedule it like you would a meeting, make sure you follow through on it, and you know, and then the next week we might go up to 10 minutes 3 times a week, and you know, we just, it can be a nice slow progression. You don't have to get out there and hit the weight room and get on the elliptical machine and really go crazy. Just start with something that, you know, you feel like you can do, and then work your way up. And then with intensity, it's the same thing. Walking is great. Walking briskly is even better. Yeah. And if you want something even more than that, then jogging is, you know, you can get a better cardiovascular benefit from that in a shorter period of time. So for some people, efficiency, that makes good sense. But again, you don't want to start there if you've not been active at all. You want to work your way up to those things.
But I think psychologically something happens with people. They turn the corner and they think, okay, I'm on to it now. And they want those immediate results. God bless them. And so the moral of the story is just keep going. You know, it took a while to get to where we are. It's going to take a while to get to where we need to be. So let's look at those environments that you mentioned, starting with home. We have 3 photos here. Just briefly walk us through what we're seeing and why it's so important.
Okay, so this doesn't look like my home, but it looks home. Yes, it looks like kind of some cool college student home. But you know, what you basically see here is, we talked a little bit earlier about a standing table, and so it's just a table that's, you know, at about mid drift height. You can notice there the young lady that's closest to us is working on the computer. The nice thing about this is it has you socializing in a standing position.
Okay. Classroom.
Okay, great. And so for kids, this is really good. And I think, I can't tell with this particular picture if these are adjustable desks or if they are permanently standing, but you know, and I know we'll see the workplace one in a second here, but the idea here for kids too is that, you know, we send them into school, and you know, the bell rings at least at our school at 8:35, and you know, 8:45 they're in their classes, and then for a lot of them they're sitting, and so being able to have an opportunity for them to work while they're standing is a good one. And I would say that this is a really nice opportunity just to also get, you know, the kids a little bit of change of pace, and so, you know, it sometimes helps with attention as well.
Okay, finally.
And then here we have a really cool workplace that I'm sure we all wished we were at. I mean, look at that guy, he's laughing in the back, and you know, they're all, I think I've seen people wearing hats like that, but not at our workplace. But you know, here you basically have a bunch of different level tables here. You can also see the chairs that go along with them. It looks to me like those are ergonomic chairs, so that you make sure that you're able to have a good posture when you're sitting down, but then also when you're standing up, you want to have good posture, which just basically means that, you know, you kind of got your shoulders above your hips and your hips above your ankles, and you can see on the floor there too, which is an important thing. There's some mats down there. And so there's, you know, stopping sitting is really important, and that improves the health outcomes. But we also know that it's not a linear thing. If you stood all the time, that would also be bad, right? Because we need to have some sedentary and downtime as well. But those pads on the ground help with posture and impact, and so that's always a pretty good way to go too.
So, bring this all full circle. In the 1 minute we have remaining, Paul, this is a challenging question. You know it's working when? You know this is working when?
You know it's working when you're not having to think about it quite as much as you were before. You've probably set up some schedule, like, I have a standing desk, I have a timer. So timer goes off, I stand up and push the desk up, and I wait, I do that for an hour, and then I sit back down and keep going on with my day. And then, you're gonna have some, typically you're gonna have some affective, so you're gonna feel better. Your mood's gonna improve a bit. You're not gonna be winded when you do that block or go up the stairs. You're also likely, if you're doing sitting less and moving more and eating better, you're also going to see that, your clothes are fitting a little better. You're going to, just feel good overall. And so I think, that fundamental quality of life that people get from that healthy lifestyle, when it hits.
Okay, wonderful. Yeah. We have some websites in case our viewers are wanting more information. Yep. Of course, they can get a hold of you at UNMC, which is our first website, unmc.edu.
Yep.
And then there's one called juststand.org and then health.gov. Dr. Esther Brooks, I want to thank you so much for coming in and sharing your time and your expertise with us on what has become a very, very important topic. Best wishes to you moving forward.
Thank you. All right.
Thanks to our students for working so hard behind the scenes, our viewers for watching. As we close, a look at scenes from a coffee house in Omaha's Old Market is seen through the lens of Owen Rush, a junior right here at UNO. We'll see you next week.
Consider This is an issues and information program produced by UNO Television. More information and program archives can be found at netnebraska.org/Consider This. If you'd like to share your comments about this program, call UNO Television at 402-554-2516 during regular business hours, or send an email to cwyatt@unomaha.edu.
Support for Consider This is provided by the University of Nebraska at Omaha College of Communication, Fine Arts, and Media.